Hey, Reluctant Preppers, you could have been watching this video the moment it came out.
By going to HealingYourself.Life and subscribing to our new sister channel, Healing Yourself. See you there. HealingYourself.Life provides information for awareness, educational, and support purposes only and does not diagnose or prescribe treatment for any medical condition. Viewers are encouraged to do their own due diligence and consult with their own medical caregivers before making personal treatment decisions. Welcome back once again to HealingYourself.Life. We have a returning guest to talk with us about avoiding dependence on medication, especially in scenarios where you're going to want to be self-reliant. We're talking with the author, David Seaman, Doctor of Chiropractic and Master of Science in Nutrition. He's here with us. He's done groundbreaking research in the areas of reducing inflammation, and he's here with us to talk to us about how we can achieve greater independence from medication for our security and our preparedness. Dr. Seaman, thank you for joining us here again on HealingYourself.Life.
Thanks for having me again.
I'm going to hold up a copy of your book that we've been working through. It's The Deflame Diet, and you talk in there about, after having coined the term deflame to talk about the opposite of inflammatory processes, but rather anti-inflammatory processes, and how people can make intentional lifestyle choices, including, most notably, dietary choices that are going to help them to switch their body's systems in their process over from inflammatory to anti-inflammatory. If you could just give us maybe a quick recap of how that's related to your expertise and your research, and then we'll jump right on into what it has to do with pain.
Sure. Well, let me try to put them both together at the same time. Pain itself is a manifestation of chronic inflammation. And about, in terms of pain and characterizing, actually thinking like, why would someone want to, because when people think about chronic pain or they think about a chiropractor, they think of typically back manipulation. Mm-hmm. Right. So my experience when I was in school was I wanted to know why people didn't respond to manipulation and exercise and other things. And that got me into looking at this chronic inflammation avenue. And when it comes to pain, no matter if one is an MD, a DO, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, it really doesn't make any difference which health care profession one is in. When it comes to learning about pain and pain mechanisms, poorly taught actually. We learn about it in a very unsophisticated fashion. Yeah, I know. Yeah, look at your surprise.
Yeah.
It's actually very interesting. We learn about diagnosing diseases, no matter what profession you're in, diagnosing diseases, and then how to treat it with given therapies.
Right.
So if you're a medical doctor, medication, surgery are the most common, obviously. Mm-hmm. If you're a physical therapist or a chiropractor, manual care, exercise, massage therapist, massage. And so you learn to treat almost named conditions as opposed to understanding the mechanism. So when I got into practice, I'm looking at these patients going, I kind of don't really get how pain works.
Right.
And and I was like, what do I do? So I started going to the library, going to bookstores and getting books on pain mechanisms. And then I realized, wow, there's a whole area of information that I didn't learn. And so I wrote a paper. It was published in 1999. And there's a scientific, it's called NIH, National Institutes of Health.
Sure.
The website's PubMed, PubMed.gov. So you could put my name in there, Seaman Dr. Pain, and this paper will appear. And it was published almost 20 years ago now. And to my surprise, to verify how complicated pain is and how confused most practitioners are about it across the board, I found out recently when I was looking at who cited that paper, 2 years after I wrote the paper in 1999, the director of pain management at Deaconess, it's Brigham and Women's. Brigham and Women's Hospital is Harvard Med School's hospital.
Oh, okay.
So the question is, why would some guy at Harvard cite me?
Right.
And because Harvard has access to everything. So why would he pick my paper, some chiro? And the reason why is because it's a confusing topic. Mechanisms of pain are complicated across the board. So I wrote this classification article on pain mechanisms. And you can break it down into basically if you have viscera, as in gut or heart, for all your visceral organs, and then your musculoskeletal tissues, joints, muscles, bones, they all come from embryologically a similar tissue. And so if you think about, say, gut pain, it's really no different neurologically from shoulder or back pain.
Okay.
It's the same exact mechanism. It's just in a different location with a different name, so you treat it differently.
Okay.
So the different treatments make people think that pain is different depending upon where it is.
Yeah.
And that is not the case.
Oh, yeah,
So-
because when I think about that, when you say the neck or shoulder, I think, well, that's muscle, and your gut. I didn't think of that as like muscle pain as well, you know. So
Yes, visceral muscle pain.
visceral muscle pain. Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I realized at that point that even guys who are running Harvard's pain management center are kind of confused by the area of pain. So the way it works out in healthcare is that you have pain scientists who do the research, but they don't talk very often to the clinicians. So clinicians have almost their own language of pain mechanisms. And that creates a lot of problems. Like, for example, in physical therapy and chiropractic and orthopedic medicine, they use the word mechanical back pain, mechanical neck, which is a stupid word, frankly, because our muscles are muscles and joints and bone and connective tissue. So they're musculoskeletal tissues. They're not mechanical. They're musculoskeletal.
Right.
And so mechanical pain is a bad word. It means musculoskeletal pain.
Okay.
But we use that word mechanical pain, what people think about is I just move, or it's a mechanical thing independent from body chemistry. And that's very, very problematic for treating pain effectively. Because if you think that pain is mechanical inside a body that's made of chemistry, like our entire body is pure chemistry.
Right.
So how come that something that's pure chemistry have pain that's independent from the chemistry and mechanical?
Gotcha.
Okay,
Right?
that makes sense. Yeah.
So now it's easy for you guys because you guys haven't been brainwashed by bad pain language. So if someone goes to an orthopedist or a physical therapist or a chiropractor and they get this mechanical pain talk given to them,
Right.
they don't think anything else about lifestyle.
No.
They'll often think,
Well, I will tell you, I went to a physical therapist because I was having low back pain. And when you mentioned now, because of your Deflame diet book and stuff, nobody ever talked to me about, gee, maybe you might want to cut out the M&Ms because they're probably causing the flare-up. Because last time I talked about my lack of M&Ms. But so nobody talked. They just gave me the exercise, which actually did help. I was amazed. It did actually. The exercises helped and all of that. But it wasn't a long-term fix. And I think that's where your diet comes in with the deflaming, whereas you're feeding your body things so that you're not flaming up, those muscles and stuff that are getting irritated. So that's really interesting because I bought into, if I do the exercises, I'll completely get better.
yeah,
and
it's just mechanical.
And it was short-term. It was short-term fix, but it wasn't a long-term fix.
Are you feeling better? Have you modified your M&Ms?
Oh, yeah, I don't eat them anymore.
And so then, has that changed your pain?
Yeah, I do have, because of the Lyme and then the Candida, and then I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. So I do have some, because of the Hashimoto's, still some pain, but it's definitely gotten better. And the Lyme was causing a lot of neck pain for me, and I still have some hip pain. But I think along with, I was years with a bad diet. And, when you talk about, I was limiting calories, but I wasn't eating the healthy foods I should have. I was putting in the M&Ms because I wanted them. So now that I'm eating healthy and going, we've been gluten-free for a little while too. So anyway, eating healthier diet, I feel like those muscle aches are getting better. I injured my hip, so it's bothering me. But I think it's going to get better if I continue on a healthy diet again.
But you experienced, though, how the separation between mechanics and chemistry is problematic.
It was it's just so great to hear that you're talking about that, because that really made no sense to me, because I thought the physical therapist knows what they're doing, and again, even going to the chiropractor, because I do go there, there's not a lot of nutritional education even from them. So, I mean, he's got his videos going, which is great. And so you learn some very much on that, but not always the connection between the pain and nutrition. So that's a really good concept to know about.
I'll just play devil's advocate for a moment, because some people will, they'll go out and do some extreme exertion, moving furniture or something, and they'll tear something, and they'll get this huge painful problem that they've got to deal with, or they'll be told, oh, your cartilage pad that's supposed to be separating these things is worn out, and now you've got bone on bone or something like that. So there are some problems that certainly seem like, whether it's a tear from an extreme exertion, or whether it's things that shouldn't be touching each other, that there are some things could be described as pretty mechanical. But maybe you're saying that surrounding that and the healing of that, I mean, I'll let you go ahead and kind of give the counterpoint to that, is that maybe that's a small percentage of what most people experience routinely as pain in their lives.
Well, the thing is, if you use the word mechanical, your brain automatically gets rid of the idea that chemistry is there.
Okay.
And so really it should be more movement and position and exercise that can reduce pain. Like, for example, low back pain is often helped by doing cardiovascular exercise. You wouldn't call your back pain lung pain, right?
Right.
Yeah, I got this pulmonic back pain. So that doesn't really make any sense. A friend of mine the other day, because we were talking this, because it's really complicated for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And he made that connection. I'm like, yeah, that's a good way to look at it, because if you're exercising, you're like walking on a treadmill or jogging or sitting on a stationary bike, and your back pain gets better. Mm-hmm. I mean, your cardiovascular system is improving, and likely changing inflammatory chemistry, which is probably what's taking place.
Right.
And so the word mechanical doesn't need to be used. Again, movement, position is a much better word. If movement and position helps you, that's fantastic. It would be great for you, Melody, if just movement and position and exercise has knocked out your pain, but yours was more complicated by gut stuff and some autoimmune stuff, so you have complicating factors.
Right.
So as people age, we all get complicating factors as we age, because aging ends in the totally most complete and undeniable inflammatory state called death, right? I mean, that's pure, total inflammation. It's over. So as we move in that direction, we flame up more and more. As I think I mentioned last time, it's called inflammaging.
You're right. Yes, yes, I remember.
So if one is stressing out, not sleeping, smoking, eating poorly, drinking no water, not exercising, staying in the dark, all those factors create an inflammatory state. Mm-hmm. And now you get hurt. Mm-hmm. And you have a tearing type event.
Right.
Yep.
And then you're giving, well, just do some exercisey things and take an opiate, and it doesn't get better. So the idea should be to be as anti-inflammatory as possible before one gets injured, because we're all going to get injured at some point.
Right.
And we're all going to get old.
We're all going to get old.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
By the grace of God, yes.
We're going to get old, and then we're going to get injured, and the higher, so think of it like an inflammatory threshold or an inflammatory barometer. The more flamed up somebody is, the more likely they are to not respond to, say, exercise or opiates, because they got to change their body chemistry. Mm-hmm. And opiates, exercise cannot change chemistry caused by lack of sleep, smoking, stressing, and living on drive-by self-shooting foods.
Right.
And that is what happens to lots of people when they get injured, and they get hit with their passive care, is called, or medications, and they're not explained about the inflammatory potential that we talked about recently.
Right.
And that can lead people, because what happens is if you think about, say, the microphones like in our ears, imagine this is a nerve. It's not a nerve, it's a nerve cell.
Okay.
And so nerve cells, they basically touch different tissues. And so they respond, these nerve cells, they tell the spinal cord and brain what's taking place in these tissues. And so there's this ongoing talk. So you can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So this ongoing talk, the cells are always talking, and they're talking in the language of chemistry.
Okay.
And so it turns out, interestingly, when it comes to the whole opiate issue, your immune cells, once they actually sense you're healing, your immune cells dump opiates in the area Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, very, very.
That'd be a lot
Yeah.
cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kidding, people.
Problem
Kidding.
is- Yeah. Well, interesting also, green vegetables and fruits and all your healthy foods, they also could contain natural salicylates like aspirin.
Okay. Okay.
And the bioflavonoids and the colorful substances, the carotenoids, they're all also anti-inflammatory. So if you're eating those foods and you're creating the right healing environment, your system can shift over from pushing pain expression.
Yeah.
Because if you get injured, your body wants you to like recover and not move. Because if you move around on an injured area, it'll make it worse.
Yeah.
So if your body is so flamed up, your body cells can't tell that it's time to heal, because it's not time to heal because of sugar, flour, refined oils, smoking, not sleeping, and all the rest of the stuff that we've talked about.
Right.
And then now you never shift into a healing mode, and so those nice opioid immune cells don't show up and cool out the pain.
Got it. Okay.
Well,
So-
you mentioned a couple things we've just going to have to circle back to, especially for our preparedness-minded viewers, because you talked about, and this is interesting, people, when they think about preparing for a potential emergency situations, whether it's a major weather event or whether it's an economic collapse or a political event or whatever, if people are really interested in kind of setting themselves up so they're not utterly dependent upon outside systems and outside help, whether it's availability of supplies or whether it's things that to keep them on an even keel, you mentioned that rather than just thinking in terms of like stocking up food and water and weapons and money or whatever people have on their list of things that they want to make sure that they have stockpiles of, you're saying that your own inner chemical health of your body, the state that your body is in, is one of your most precious stores of well-being that's going to face any event that you're going to come up against. And for some of us, it's as inglorious as shoveling the snow and straining your back or something like that.
Right.
But you're saying that the better prepared you are internally, the better you're going to be prepared externally. And then another thing you touched on was aging. Surprisingly, a lot of our viewers, we have quite a wide spectrum of viewers, and a lot of them are middle-aged and older. And so I think that there's a real sympathy on the part of our audience on understanding that pain and experience of pain can increase with age in various ways. We had Dr. Jay Nielsen on recently talking about various hormonal shifts in pain management and that sort of thing. And he talked about the historic lifespan of the human. We're far outliving our historic typical lifespans now from millennia in the past, and that rather than thinking that what's terribly wrong, it's like, well, we're expecting so much more from our physiology than what it had been expected to deliver in the past. So if you could touch in the spirit of self-reliance and independence, and not being unhealthily dependent on outside sources of to get by, what can we do and what should we do to prepare ourselves to be better able to weather the storms that come in life?
First, if you think about the blue zones on Earth, like Okinawa is a blue zone, and they tend to have a lot of centenarians.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So I think if you have the right genes and the right lifestyle and the right mindset and everything is fine, living to 100 is quite reasonable without disease.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. My great-grandfather lived to be 96, and he just died of old age.
Wow.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that he pretty much looked like just an older version of himself. Because I met him, of course, when I was like, one? And he was probably, I don't know how old, he was probably 60 then.
Okay.
So I just saw the older version of him.
Yeah.
But he never got heavy. He the great-grandfather, outlived his son.
Wow.
In terms of age.
Wow.
All of his sons
Okay.
and daughters in terms of age.
Okay.
And my uncle died at 66 because of pursuing the flame.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So So the main thing, and he ate bacon and eggs every day. He just stayed active.
Okay.
And didn't eat a lot of junk, smoked cigars. I'm not saying people should do that.
Yeah.
But the idea is, as we said last time, is to basically look just like an older version of your younger self. And
Right,
so
I
you
got
want
it.
to you want to maintain the weight or achieve the weight that you were when you were, say, 20 to 25 years of age. And so that is the most important thing. And it's best to do it on changing out all your pro-inflammatory calories, the sugar, flour, refined oils, shift them over to vegetation. That's the best move that one could possibly make. So green vegetables, for example. I always say broccoli just because broccoli is just a very healthy, stereotypical green vegetable that most people tend to like. But vegetation of all kinds, no matter what it is. So if we take in those calories,
and now I was just going to say, there's the wide variety in the store. You can even get like a wonderful mixed green salad. If you don't like broccoli, there's great, with all kinds of good greens in there, different kinds. Not just romaine or whatever. It's all kinds of. You can get dandelion in there and all that. So I think that's if you go ahead and put a good salad dressing on, if it makes it more palatable to you. But obviously, it can't be high fat. Otherwise, the calories are just going to be there in your salad dressing. But go ahead.
Another semi-blue zone would be the people of Catawba, which is down in New Guinea, and most of their calories come from sweet potatoes and fruit.
Okay.
And
You're
fish.
using the term blue zone. Can you help our viewers?
Somebody that may not know that.
Sure. The blue zone is just a term that's used to describe certain areas on Earth where people live a long time. Typically, a whole lot more people in those areas live to be 100 than other areas. Even La Jolla, California, I think is a blue zone.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So they're very, very healthy there. Southern California lifestyle. They're all fit. If you ever go there, you can just in Encinitas, that whole kind of southern San Diego kind of area. They're very, very, very healthy. They're all pursuing health. And so they want to avoid what we're talking about, ending up. I mean, there's nothing worse for somebody than being hooked on opiates. Because the second that you actually get pain reduction day after day from opiates, you become constipated. And who needs that?
Right.
Well, and besides that, it can be a lot more sinister, because if you can talk to us about...
You can get very much addicted, and then if you can't get your opioid, they move... I think that was one of the things, one of the researchers I was looking at said, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, and there was some controversy. Someone was saying that they feel like the heroin addiction now has actually been caused by more and more regulation on the opiates, so people can't get their pain meds, so they're going for the illegal drugs. Now, there was some controversy there. Some were saying, no, that the heroin addiction was escalating even before there was restrictions on the opioids. So you can tell me which one is correct.
Well, the problem with the opiate story is that it's a murky history.
Okay.
I think I mentioned just briefly last time. If you go back to the Opium Wars.
Oh yeah, that's
there
quite
are
a few
articles.
years.
Mid 1800s, where articles talk about how that led to essentially the decimation of China back then. I mean, I would guess, although I don't know, because it's hard to really tell. But I would suspect, though, that they were trading with the Europeans in the 1800s. Why did they close their trading window after that until the 1900s? Probably because of what happened to them during the Opium Wars. And they got wiped out.
Okay.
Yeah. And so even before that, opium was used in trade. So forever, opium has been big business. Okay. And we know what big business means. There's lots of skullduggery and who knows what goes on behind the scenes.
Right.
But opium has always been big business.
Okay.
Over 100 years ago, in Teddy Roosevelt's administration, his opiate czar, they didn't use that word, but he said that Americans were a bunch of drug fiends. And he was referring to the opiate crisis back in 1907.
Wow, I don't remember reading about that actually in the history books, but do you remember? He remembers. Okay.
Yeah, it just recycles itself.
Okay.
And so this current, now the way I also look at this is I kind of wonder when they make a big deal about something, I kind of wonder, well, what are they trying to do simultaneously? Yeah. And the most obvious example of that would be the drug Prozac. Prozac came out in like 1990, 1992. I forget which year it was. But Prozac what it does is it inhibits the reuptake of serotonin, and serotonin has a mood benefiting effect.
Right.
Yeah. And
isn't Prozac supposed to cause you not to be depressed?
Yeah, preventing the reuptake of it. So
Okay,
so
got it. Okay, misunderstood what you were saying.
So that means that imagine two nerve cells talking.
Yeah.
If you prevent reuptake, then the serotonin between the nerve cells talking back and forth stays there longer.
Okay,
it's called a reuptake inhibitor.
Got it.
They have combination medications where they have serotonin and norepinephrine too, reuptake inhibitors. But anyway, tryptophan is an amino acid, and for years tryptophan was recommended as an antidepressant. And so there was some tainted tryptophan that came in from Japan. It was somewhere in Asia.
Okay.
And there were a handful of, there's called eosinophilic myalgia, I think was the condition. And it may have killed a couple of people, but they banned tryptophan across the board in America.
Yeah,
and
right.
The tainted tryptophan came from outside of America.
Yeah, and I remember the analogy being from the people who were really into natural medicines and stuff were saying, well, Tylenol kills a ton of people, but they're not taking Tylenol off the shelf because they had, and they also was the Tylenol incident where there was the tainting of that. Maybe that's the one I'm remembering.
Liver damage and stuff.
Liver damage too. But
alcohol.
Alcohol is also. So why take off tryptophan bullets? And they did it to ephedra too when it was, ephedra is only going to be very dangerous to you if you took it overdoses of it. So they seem to want to pick on those versus the Tylenol and the Advil, and those keep going.
So
Go ahead.
This is what happened. Yeah, this is what happened with the Prozac. Basically, the week that they banned tryptophan, there was a miracle drug called Prozac put on the cover of Newsweek magazine the same week.
Oh my gosh.
Within 7 days.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that.
What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Right. So my thought is that this opiate crisis is going to usher in a new medication that's better and safer. And if you look at if you hunt around the internet, you can find that there are new pain meds coming on board all the time. So I'm kind of wondering if that's where there's going to be a shift, because when you think about healthcare is a business, and if everyone got healthy, there would be a collapse.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if we stopped doing white powders like sugar and flour, covered with refined oils, then we would not need white powders called medications. Right. So think about what would happen to all the employees of Coke and Pepsi and McDonald's and all the rest of them, and then the multi-billion dollar drug industry. Okay. So people have to stay sick. For the system to keep going, we need people sick. Right. There isn't the incentive, because you could say cynically, because the money isn't there for people to stay healthy. That's interesting. So the other thing I saw on the news today was our sheriff talking about the opioid crisis, and he said, if you would have even told me 10 years ago that I would be carrying I had it in my head, the Narcan, there we go, it slipped, the Narcan drug to it counteracts the narcotics. And he said, if you told me even 10 years ago, or when I started my career, that I'd be having to have this in my pocket, he said, I thought it'd be like, no, this is ridiculous. So what has happened in the last 10 to 20 years, it seems like we're going through that same crisis again, like you said, in Roosevelt, and they did in China. What's causing us to, again, go for either the heroin or going to the doctor to get our medications? Is it really, you think because I would think back in the 1900s we weren't that inflamed, right? Because we were eating pretty healthy, right? Well, I would say that it's hard. Well, it's hard for me to know exactly what population of people he was talking about. Okay. Because if you look at pictures from 1900 and then even the Great Depression, there's young, fit, healthy people. Yeah. So it was probably not that big of a scale. Okay. Because there are much more healthy people. I mean, I just think when you were growing up, I know when I was growing up, I looked around, and most adults watching when I was playing Little League baseball, most of the adults were normal size and weight. And so the there were not this 2/3 of the adult population either overweight or actually obese. That didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, and you go to other countries. Our daughter now is living temporarily in Israel, and she came back to our country for a visit because our one son was getting married, and she said, Mom, and my daughter's slim. She said, in where I am, she said, I'm the, in Israel, that this is what people look like. They look slim, even slimmer than I am. And she said, I come here to where you guys are, and she said, I'm really slim compared to everybody else, and she couldn't believe that just from having been away from the United States for a little while, how big people are here versus how they are in Israel. It was just kind of amazing to her. So it seemed like this is our country. This is our country that seems to be more on
leading the world.
Leading the world in obesity. Yeah.
Well, we are the leaders of consumerism across the board, right? Consumerism and endless temptation to engage in all manners of quasi-pleasurable but inflammatory behaviors.
Okay.
So that is really the issue. So when someone gets hurt, when they're flamed up, like your daughter said, that she comes back and she sees this sea of flesh everywhere.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist over there, and same in general, same for Europe.
Mm-hmm. And
you come to the States, and it's just these huge people. They're inflamed, and they're much more likely to experience pain. They're much more likely. I mean, 1 out of 10 individuals, adults, is on an antidepressant. They would like. I mean, you can actually watch interviews, television interviews on YouTube about, well, everyone should be on statins. So everyone should be on a statin, an antidepressant, and a hypertensive medication, and Tylenol or whatever it is. I mean, that's kind of like there was actually an article, a paper written about probably 10, 15 years ago. It was called the poly pill, and they suggested that everyone take a couple of antihypertensives, a statin, folic acid, and a couple other, and one more medication to treat heart disease, as opposed to, and then the scientists who said this is kind of foolish, they wrote a paper called the poly meal, which is healthier and better for you than the poly pill. So we are a drug culture.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. Okay. And the foods that we eat are drugs. When you think about the flicker rate of television, you get these mesmerized people. That's almost like a mental drug. Okay. And you go to the movie theater, what do you get? You just load up on junk. It just never ends.
True. Yeah.
It never ends. And no one says stop.
No.
And so you go to the physical therapist, or you could go to any physician and then say, well, what do I do? Well, here, we'll give you this injection. You'll do this posture thing. You do this exercise. And they say nothing about lifestyle.
Right.
It's because there's not that connection made between lifestyle and the chemistry that's taking place. Like as I was saying before, that chemistry taking place right where the pain nerve cells are touching all the different tissues. And that is just not in their thinking. Right. Typically, I mean, some yes, but typically it's getting better. Yeah. Most of the papers that I've seen written about this, lots of them have been coming out from outside the United States.
Interesting.
But there's still not very many, though. There are very, very few papers written about this, because how do you monetize broccoli?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, well, and as you point out, if people adopt a healthier anti-inflammatory or deflaming lifestyle, they can wean themselves off of some of their pain medications and some of their other medications. I think you mentioned several examples of that.
Right. People lose weight and they don't need the doctor's prescription for hypertension.
That's
and all that
conflict
stuff.
of interest on many aspects of our economy. Pharmaceutical companies, hospital administration companies, and on are not going to, on the surface, going to benefit from people making healthier choices. So the deck's stacked against us. I guess I wanted you to tie one more time back, though, for people who are preparedness-minded, to reinforce that idea that the healthier, the less inflammatory they can make their body, and less dependent on this supply of drugs, which, and you mentioned in our pre-talk, that we live in this world. You said the U.S. is leading in a lot of these consumer lifestyles, but a lot of those are based on a just-in-time supply chain and everything working just right. And what happens when things don't work just right, when we're so dependent on those things?
It would be a disaster. Imagine being on 6 medications and then 10 days later, no medication.
Nothing. That's right. You got nothing.
Yeah. And the people in Catawba and the Okinawans, I mean, most of these people, they live their entire lives into their 90s without medication.
Wow.
Anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. So I think the way for your preparative minded viewers is to think about it, because anyone who's thinking about being self-reliant will know what Eisenhower said, military industrial complex, right? It's going to grow, and it'll just take over. Well, what about the food industrial complex?
Yeah, right.
What about the pharmaceutical industrial complex?
Yeah.
I mean, these things, and they're kind of like vampires. You don't have to eat their food or take their drugs, but if you eat their food, you're going to take their drugs at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very
you
true. That's very good. Yeah, that's
a really good one.
That is good. And
Say it again. I forget what I said.
You said if you eat their food, you're gonna take their drugs at some point. That's gonna be I'm gonna write that down.
That's a really good. That is good. That's a good.
Yeah. And the thing about this too is that people say, "Oh yes, GMOs." Mm-hmm. GMOs aren't the big issue because you could easily be sick 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago if you just lived on the sugar and flour that was non-GMO back then.
Right, that's true. That is true.
Well, maybe it is worse, though.
Yeah, it might be.
Well, the GMO papayas and zucchini are not our health issues.
Okay.
That is not the problem. And I'm not saying, because I don't know how they might disrupt metabolism, if at all.
Yeah, right.
I don't really, to me, that's really a side issue. The big issue is the sugar, flour, refined oils.
Right.
That contain no fiber, no potassium, no vitamins, no minerals, no phytonutrients. They're basically you just leave them sitting there and they could last for 50, 100 years.
Right. Yeah. The GMO is the only thing I know that can, I think, cause an issue for people if the GMO was made with something that someone's allergic to, and we have no way of knowing that.
Fish genes
so
in a tomato
if it's a fish gene and you're allergic to fish in a tomato and you eat the tomato, you can have a reaction to it. So it can be dangerous for people who have allergies.
Sneak attack.
But then you would know, though. But then you would know if that food was problematic. You would have a reaction, and you would know.
But you don't know the supplier. Not every tomato is a poison apple.
Right, right.
So getting back to the idea of pain and drugs, you've really got my mind whirling now, because you've talked about the opioid epidemic. It's like they've been here a long, long time, for centuries. So is it really such a new thing, or is it just an old thing brought new? But it is on the increase. At least we're told it's on the increase by the people the media and our local law enforcement is guy we happen to have met and trust his judgment. But you've opened up a whole new thought process about that for us, saying,
well, they weren't carrying Narcan with them, years ago.
Sure.
And now they are, because they have especially in our town, it is a big epidemic, and they are, quite a few people are in trouble.
But you're also saying that there's a conflict of interest there, because never let a good crisis go to waste. This can be serving of ulterior motives of people who are stand to profit on providing the alternative. Look, here, you got the problem, now here's the solution. However, the solution, if it doesn't increase your personal well-being and your personal independence and that sort of thing. So as opposed to what you're suggesting is that we look to populations in the world who are naturally more long-lived, pain-free, low drug usage, that sort of thing. And you've mentioned several of those principles, but I guess if you could identify, you've mentioned a couple of times avoiding certain food types and substituting other food types. So in your book, the Deflame Diet, if you could distill it into kind of like your key recommendations for people who want to start making responsible choices in these areas, one thing would be find a copy of your book and read it.
That's right. Yeah.
Another would be, based on that, they're going to be convinced to stop certain things and start certain things. What are the recap on those?
I just wanted to add before you do that. I remember reading, I must have been psychology, where we are motivated, the pain, pleasure thing. So I think they are connected in the sense of we have innately in our bodies wanting pleasure and avoiding pain. We just want that. And so I'm thinking about that with the food diet, making it that it turns out to be pleasurable for us, not only to be eating those types of foods. I think we have to train ourselves at first, for that is going to be sitting down and enjoying that vegetable or the fruit that we're eating and really being conscious about it. Because I think in our fast-paced world, we are eating that fast food and we ingest it and we're not thinking about what it's doing to our bodies. And so in order to avoid the pain, then we go to the opioids or the Advil or whatever we have handy. But if we follow your diet, we will be able to experience more pleasure in our lives. And we just have to get beyond, I think, wanting some of our whatever. For me, it was the M&Ms, and get beyond that so that I can get healthy,
Yeah. Well, two things. First, I've traced it back to the mid-'80s in terms of the most frequently or the most commonly prescribed medication back in the 80s. They were opiates. Mm-hmm. They were the number one prescribed medication back in the 80s. So they've been number one for a long time.
Okay.
Wow.
And they've been around for, so it's just, and again, I don't know what this crisis actually is. I can't really put my finger on it. Because if you look at the most commonly prescribed medications, there's always been opiates, at least in my lifetime. Ever since I was in college, and probably before, because I only get back to the 80s, it's been opiates. So that's the first thing. And when it comes to the pleasure issue, when you think about the word happiness, I think it's a problem, that word, because happiness and pleasure, it's much better for people to reorient their thinking in terms of not being unhappy.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
So being even in pleasure and pain, if you will, that's sort of that's a Bhagavad Gita, that's a Hindu thing, being even in pleasure and pain. And Rudyard Kipling has a great poem. It's called If, and one part of it says, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same.
Oh, great. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So being even in pleasure and pain. But because we watch TV, we buy this, buy that, do this, you're always
we're hitting with
next fix.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We live in a dopamine hit-rich world.
Yeah.
And so people have to step back.
Okay.
And try to walk away from that environment. That's why, I do not watch television. Even when I travel and the TV's there, I don't watch it.
Okay.
I just do not watch. And this, I'm not the only one, obviously. It's very, very common for people to, nowadays in our mindset, to avoid that because of the endless propaganda that goes on.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's propaganda across the board, and part of the propaganda is pleasure, happiness, as opposed to, hey, sometimes you're going to have some unhappiness, but the goal should be to not be unhappy. And nobody who's overweight or obese can really tell you that they're just happy. I'm so excited that I've gained 50 pounds. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Nobody. So people have to step back and then look at their brains basically being on autopilot to chronically gratify desires. Yeah. And that's what food is. It's been shifted from being real. And if you don't eat for several hours, if you do the 16-8, it's called 16-8, it's called time-restricted feeding.
Sure. Yes.
So you stop eating at 8 o'clock at night, and then your next meal is at noon the next day. No matter what you eat, it tastes pretty good.
Yeah, right. That's true. Yeah. That's true.
Right?
Yeah. And that self-discipline that you're describing there is completely sound from a spiritual and psychological and physical. You're saying from a biochemistry level, it's good medicine. But I'm just reflecting that as you mentioned a minute, this our culture teaching us seek pleasure. Right. That weakens us. It weakens our will. It weakens our nature.
Totally weakened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awful. No, it is awful. Yeah. And so now people live depressed because they're depressed, and then they got to get their next sensory hit, their next dopamine hit, no matter what it is, whether it's checking text messages.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Oh, somebody unfriended me. Oh.
Yeah. So it's endless. So people should really think back about, in 1900 and look at how simple our lives were. No television. Maybe you had a radio. I forget when it came out. Everyone had gardens, and you worked. I think the cure for most people is get out in your yard and make it look nice. Clean your house.
You get sunshine.
Clean your house and make your yard look good, and plant some food, and get out there and do that, and get away from the sensory input, because You go online to look for something. Next, look at that ad over there. Oh, look at that ad. And you click on it. Next thing you know, you're gone.
Right, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
It's very habit forming.
Yeah.
We all know that, but it's just embarrassing. Every few years that go by, the stories that I thought, I've got to tell people that what I saw this day or whatever, they're not even interesting anymore because we just surpassed them. Screens are pervading every part of our lives, every room in our house. I remember one time we were on a vacation to get away from it all. We were on this cruise in the middle of the ocean where we thought, now nobody can reach us by, our cell phones won't work. We're not going to check our emails.
We can't. It's too expensive.
And every place we went on that vessel was programmed music, blaring, boom, boom, blaring music. And finally, by some quirks of events, we ended up on a balcony where there was no music and it was just us and the sea. And we thought,
that is the place to be.
This is what we were talking about. It's just us and the flying fish for hours.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah, and I think people need more of that. We tend to even sometimes
more
on our
of
vacation.
less.
Right, more of less. Yeah. We tend to even go on vacations that are, exciting and what can we do next and all of that. Right.
Busy, rush.
Rather than going, no, we're going on a vacation to get away from it all and relaxing.
Decompress.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder. This has been a very helpful conversation for us.
Yeah, it's good.
So if people think about decompressing and set back and think about being mindful about the urges that their bodies say, do this, do that, do this, do that. And if you just sit there, one of the things that really amazed me, like because even though I'm into this, obviously this nutrition and stuff, when I get stressed out, my brain says, eat that, eat that. Like,
yes.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Right?
No. Yeah, and I think that those feelings don't go away either because they
never go away.
No, because it's like I look at when we go out to a restaurant or something and man, that dessert menu really looks good and I just want it so bad.
We heard a speaker one time. He was an ex he was a member of Narcotics Anonymous, and he said his mind will tell him stuff sometimes. He says, honestly, I think my mind thinks it can kill me and go on living on its own.
Right. Think about that dessert. Think about the dessert that you want. When you wake up the next morning, if you said no, if you were mindful in the moment and said no, you never wake up the next morning going, God, I should have eaten that dessert last night.
That's true. You did not.
Oh, the missed opportunity. Oh,
what was I thinking?
I could have stuffed myself till I was sick. Oh, and I didn't do it. Dang it.
So in that moment, you're like, I'm glad I didn't do it. I need to do it again. And so that's how one can get a handle on it. Because in the morning, same thing for drinking. You go, God, I should have finished the entire bottle of wine last night.
Right.
Why do I only have one?
Yeah.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
So if you can say no before you go to bed, you wake up in the morning with more resolve.
Well, you probably sleep better too.
Yeah, that's true.
But you're right. That's the strengthening aspect, and it's psychologically strengthening. It's physically nurturing, but it's spiritually sound. It's the most sound advice you can give too, because it's that mastery, self-mastery, what you're talking about, and not just being subject to those compulsions. Yeah, that's great. Compulsions.
Well, you think of your body as a vehicle, and the only vehicle you have in this life, whatever happens after we go, it doesn't make much sense to abuse the vehicle.
Yes, got it. Yeah.
And so we should be directing the vehicle, not letting it direct us.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yep.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know that I've heard another on all the preparedness channels that I've listened to. So much of the focus is on stockpiling goods, and so people talk about building skills. They talk about forming real deep friendships and networking with neighbors, and there's building intangible things as well, but and physical fitness. So that's an internal sense of a resource that you can develop, self-defense skills, that kind of thing. But this one about
getting your health back,
well-being, and making sure that you're really that you have a deflamed, healthful processes dominating your body, and that you establish the habits that are going to support that long-term for you and make you less dependent on these stinking drugs and the
medical system that isn't going to be there.
No, it's not. And you mentioned that you talked about the increase of, it's like a parasite. You mentioned that. You said it's like a parasite. And it really is swelling up to basically consume the toast. And we really are. We're paying more and more for less and less. We're getting higher and higher deductibles, higher and higher premiums. And and these costs are just going through the roof. I was shocked. I called to complain about a bill recently I thought was unreasonable. And they said, oh, well, that was reduced by 50% because your insurance company, if it hadn't been for that, you would have paid twice that much. Oh, I guess I'm grateful. It's down
just for walking in the building.
Down from ludicrous to ridiculous
It was for the building fee. It was an actual building
just
fee.
for a quick clinic
Couldn't
visit.
Believe it.
Yeah. So anyway, gosh, we could go.
So it's much better for us to have a what's the word for the insurance, the catastrophic insurance.
Yeah.
And just,
major medical.
And just pay it out.
Right.
And then not have to worry about the deductible. Mm-hmm. Like I think if you get the bronze plan, it's like $800 a month. If you're in your 50s like I am, and so you pay $800 a month, and then your deductible is like $5,000, $8,000. So you're already out of pocket like $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 for just one person before you even have the insurance kick in. So it's much better just to pay the $8,000 if you have to do it, and then that's all you pay because you're not relying on this system that
and
really
then
is not.
Go be healthy. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's we have heard that from another guest talking about the best. I think it was Wayne Allen Root. He said one of the best things you can do to survive Obamacare is just stay out of the hospital. Stay out of the system. Stay well enough that you don't need to use the system.
Yeah. Basically, weigh what you weighed when you were 20 years old or more. If you have more muscle, and feed your body with all the healthy anti-inflammatory foods, and avoid the sugar, flour, and refined oils. And turn the television off and realign the brain, be more mindful and forget about pleasure and happiness as like, because when people are even and just calm, that's the happiness and pleasure is a surge of chemistry that is transient and short-lived. No one can live there. You have to come back down. And the place you want to stop is in the land of not unhappy, not unhappiness.
Got it.
Yeah, peace.
Yeah.
That's true.
Thank you, Dr. Seaman. It's been a very educational. Makes me we should do a thing on our juicing, because I was just thinking I felt glad that we mentioned last time we've been doing juicing, and we did it last night again, and we've been having it again today.
Yeah.
So we'd love to have you back to talk more about some specific starts that people can make. Say that they're committed, they're
small
convinced.
Starts,
so what's 1, 2, 3, 4 things that they can start doing? So if we can have you back another time to talk about that, sort of some things that they can begin and really go, I'll make some inch stones of progress in my life and let the momentum start building. So
absolutely,
it was very, very thought provoking. Thank you for this conversation.
You. That was great.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, we've been talking with Dr. Seaman. He's the author of the book, The Deflame Diet: How You Can Change Your Choices to Intentionally Set Yourself Up for a More Healthy Body and a More Healthy Life. And just thank you very much for joining us here on HealingYourself.Life.
Thank you.
Thanks again for having me.